Hey everyone, welcome to Programming in C. I'm Mokshita from CMR University. Today we're gonna learn about loops in C programming. So let's get started with the basics. In programming, a loop is a control structure that lets us execute a block of code repeatedly. You define a condition and as long as the condition is true, the code keeps running. Think of it like this. Imagine needing to print the numbers from 1 to 100. Without a loop, you would have to write 100 print statements. That's not efficient at all, right? Loops helps us to avoid that mess and keep our code clean and smart. Why do we use loops? Loops are fundamental parts of programming. For so many reasons, they save time, reduce any errors, make your program more dynamic. You you'll use loops in real life situations like taking an input, running a game logic continuously, repeating tasks like calculations or printing patterns. Once you master loops, you'll see how powerful and flexible a code can become. See the types of loops in C. C gives us three major types of loops, and each serves a specific purpose. For loop, perfect when you know how many times a loop should run. While loop, great when you don't know how many times it should run. Maybe it depends on the user's input or a real-time condition. Do while loop. This one ensures that your code block runs at least once, even if the condition is false. We'll go through each of these in details with examples. The for loop. The for loop is the most commonly used loop in C, especially when the number of iterations is known ahead of time. Here is a syntax of for loop: initialization, condition, and incrementation. The initialization where the loop variable starts. Condition as long as the as long as the as long as this is true, the loop runs. Increment or decrement. This updates the loop variable. Example, for int I is equals to 1. If I is less than or equals to 5, I plus plus, print I. This 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 will print us numbers from 1 to 10, easy and powerful. Then we have the while loop. Here is a simple syntax of the while loop, while, the condition, and the code block. And here is a simple example of the while loop. Int I is equals to 1. This declares the integer variable I and initializes it with the value 1. While I is greater than or equals to 5, this is a while loop that continues to run as long as the condition I is greater than or equals to 5 is true. In other words, the loop will keep executing until it becomes greater than 5. And print statement, this line prints the current value of I followed by a new character /n which moves the cursor to the new line, and I plus plus. This line increments the value of I by 1 after each loop iterating. By this it will give the output of 1 to 5. The while loop is basically checks if the condition before executing the code. If the code is false right away, it won't run at all. Now, the next is the do while loop. The do while loop is special because it runs the code block at least once before checking the condition. Do while the condition, and here is a simple example of do while loop. Here is the do while loop. Here is a basic syntax of do while loop. Do Here is an example. The int I is equals to 1 declares the integer variable 1 and initializes the value with 1. A do while loop is similar to the while loop, but it always runs the loop body at least once, even if the condition is false. The condition I is greater than or equals to 5. Check after the code inside the loop has executed. The print statement the prints the current value of I followed by the new line. Increment I plus plus is increments I by 1 after printing, and the code gives the output of 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. Now, why do we use do while loop instead of while loop? The key difference is do while loop always executes the block of code at least once, even if the condition is false. And it's always used in a menu driven based programs. Now let's talk about the loop controls. C has few tools to control a loop flow. Break, continue, go to. Break exits the loop entirely. Continue skips the current iteration and jumps to the next. Go to jumps to the labeled part of the code. It is not usually used so much. Here is an example for break. This is a for loop with a break statement inside. The loop starts with integer I is equals to 1. It runs as long as I is less than or equal to 10. If in each iteration I is increased by I plus plus by 1. If I is equals to 5, then break. Inside the loop, if the line checks is I equal to 5. If yes, then breaks and executes the break statement is immediately exit no matter what the loop condition is. Print. This line prints the value of I only if the break has not occurred. And the output is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now here is an example for a continue. Here this is also a for loop. It initializes I is equals to 1. If I is less than or equals to 5, the loop continues as long as this condition is true. After every iteration, I is increased by 1, I plus plus. If I inside the loop, this checks whether if I is equal to 3. If it is, then the continue statement is executed. The continue statement skips the rest of the code in the current loop iteration and then moves to the next iteration of the loop. So when I is equals to 3, the printf line is not executed. The printf line, this line prints the value of I followed by a new line /n, but it only executes if I is not equals to 3. So this gives us the output of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 by skipping the 3. Why is 3 missing? Because when I becomes 3, the continue skips the printf line, so it doesn't get printed. Now, let's move to the nested loops. That's when a loop inside another loop, like this. Here is an example for nested loop. So this will be the outer loop. The This loop controls the variable I. It starts at I is equals to 1 and runs while I is less than or equals to 3. So it runs for I is equals to 1, I is equals to 2 and I is equals to 3. The inner loop, this runs every time the outer loop runs once. It controls the variable j. It starts at 1 and runs until j is less than or equals to 2. So for each value of I, j go through values 1 and 2. The print statement, this prints the current values of I and j. So the final output is going to be if I is equals to 1, j will be 1. I is equals to 1, j will be 2. I will be 2, j will be 1. I will be 2 and j will be 2. When I is 3, j will be 3. I will be 3 and j will be 2. This is how the nested loop works. It's super helpful in working with 2D arrays, matrix operations, and pattern programs. Next, we'll learn about infinite loops. Here is a warning. Infinite, here is an example. Before going to infinite loops, here is an example to practice nested loops. A right angle triangle and a number pattern requires to control over a space, symbols, numbers. Great for interviews and coding practices. Now, let's move on to infinite loops. Infinite loops, an, infi- an infinite loop is a loop that never ends unless you forcefully stop it. Here is, here is a syntax for an infinite loop and an example. This can be useful for things like background processors, servers, or embedded systems, but it can also crash your program if you make a mistake. Always have a condition that breaks the loop eventually. Now, let's see where loops are actually used in real life world programming. Reading files line by line, or reading an input until the condition is met. Running background tasks like downloading, user login systems, game loops that keeps the game running until it exits, menu driven programs. Yeah, these are the few real life applications of loops. So yes, loops are not just theory, they're absolutely everywhere in software. The Now a few common mistakes to avoid: using equals to instead of the double equals to in the conditions, putting the semicolons accidentally right after the loop declaration, off by one errors. Always double check your loop limit. The few tips are: use the for loop when you know how many times to repeat the code. Use while loop when the number of repetition depends on something. Always try run your code for at least once or twice to test cases. And here are few examples of loops: printing numbers, calculating sum of n natural numbers, finding factorial of a number, generating multiplication tables, reversing a digit of a number. Alright, that was a full breakdown of loops in C. To summarize everything, loop help you to run a code repeatedly. You have got for loop, while loop, and do while loop. Use control statements, break, continue to tweak the loop flow. Practice pattern programs. They build logic and confidence. Understanding loops builds a strong foundation in programming. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you have made it this far, give this video a like.